Welcome to Close Listening. I'm Zach Morgenstern, joined as always by silent co-host Ludwig von B, here with another Bob Dylan review. Today we are discussing his latest album, The Shadow Kingdom. So when I first saw Bob Dylan had a new album out, my first thought was, that's a cool cover photo, and I'm excited to listen to it. Also, it's Bob Dylan. It's great anytime you get new material. My second thought was, gosh darn it, because I had just finished a video in which I discussed listening to every Bob Dylan studio album. And there was now a new one released just before my video was supposed to come out, ruining the every concept. But then I learned a bit more about what this work is. So back in 2021, Bob Dylan recruited the director Alma Harrell, known for Shia LaBeouf's movie Honey Boy, to film a somewhat unique looking concert documentary. Harrell crafted this unique aesthetic where Dylan is centered but not exclusively. We see shots of his band members kind of layered over him in the opening track. We see smoke and also occasional flashes of light and sometimes just black covering up the screen. We have artful shadows and intentionally less artful looking shadows. Shadow Kingdom is the album of that concert film. So these are all studio recordings of songs that I believe he sort of lip synced to in this concert performance. So back in 2013, I saw Bob Dylan in concert. And unlike the vast majority of my concert experiences, it wasn't exactly a dream show. Dylan's set list was a bit eccentric. A lot of, my favorite Dylan songs I took it for granted were the greatest hits, were missing. And even the songs he did sing, he sang them in a very different way. His voice was extremely mumbly, and he was just kind of hard to see. He wore all black and sort of stood there stiffly. So it was cool knowing I was seeing Bob Dylan, but it felt like I wasn't really seeing Bob Dylan. But what's interesting about Shadow Kingdom is that it sort of both celebrates that mysterious, inaccessible side of the modern Bob Dylan, while also bringing things a bit closer to the classic artist one would picture. By having the camera lens zoom in on Bob Dylan a bit more, we see what an expressive singer he actually is if you get to see him up close. His vocals have also, I don't know if they've actually technically improved or he's just taking a different approach, but they're much clearer, they're much smoother, even as he still does have a rough blue man's voice. Their track list does not consist of new material. Rather, it sees Bob Dylan revisiting old songs. And as I said, when he does his concerts, he doesn't necessarily do his greatest hits. It can be a bit frustrating if that's what you're expecting. Here again, he kind of compromises. The songs here, for the most part, are not his greatest hits, but they are from his greatest albums. So it's kind of like him going halfway between his weird modern-centric choices and him playing the songs you want. And that balance is kind of appreciated. You get to enjoy these songs that are familiar, but maybe you didn't appreciate that much before. This album opens with a song called When I Paint My Masterpiece. This is one I actually wasn't familiar with because I guess it would have only been released as a single. It eventually got released on another self-portrait, part of the Bob Dylan bootleg series, and was recorded by the band. And while it has similar themes to many Dylan works, rambling about and dodging fame, it uses this somewhat unique ancient Roman imagery that makes for a colorful break from Dylan's normal, more Dust Bowl Americana imagery. It's a song about traveling and imagine you've achieved something great and living history. Track number 2, Most Likely You Go Your Way, brackets, and I'll Go Mine, from the Blonde on Blonde album. So the defining instrument on track 1 and track 2 is definitely the accordion. It gives these songs kind of a Zydeco feel. The bass also has a bit of a rootsy slap sound. So it works out to a compromise between the loud oomph folk rock sound of the Blonde on Blonde era and the more rustic sound of contemporary Bob Dylan. Now, with this one, you can't really separate the album from the visuals from Alma Harrell's concert film. And when one watches the live performance of this, Dylan performs this like a charismatic rock band frontman. He's not quite dancing around like Mick Jagger, but he's sort of doing his version of that. And he performs the song as if he's like playfully lecturing someone. And perhaps in doing that, he's kind of repudiating the cool, cocky feel this song had originally, substituting it for a more mature emotion, like so that when he wants to tell someone off, rather than sneering at their face, he'll just playfully pretend to scold them in the mirror. Track number 3 is called Queen Jane Approximately. So this is from the Highway 61 Revisited album. And again, the original version of Queen Jane sounds cocky. He's calling this person a queen for her sort of spoiled character, her sense of importance, and almost mocking her and saying, now that everyone's exposed you for what you are, won't you come to me and beg, Queen Jane? Whereas in this performance, he's actually pleading with the line, won't you come and see me, Queen Jane? As if, yes, he can have this criticism of a person, but it doesn't mean he doesn't have insecurities of his own. I was somewhat negative in my initial review of the Highway 61 album because I felt the songs felt so conceptually and stylistically similar. I almost lost the feel for the poetry because it felt like Dylan was just repeating an act. I didn't listen to the individual lyrics. But by sort of mixing up these Highway 61 songs with other songs, you do get to appreciate them as individual compositions and hear the heart that maybe Bob Dylan wanted to get out in them in the first time. Track 4 is a really successful readaptation. This is I'll Be Your Baby Tonight from the John Wesley Harding album. And in the original recording, it was kind of a preview for his Nashville skyline sound. It was Dylan leading hard into a exaggerated country music, complete with a little bit of his 1960s swagger. Here, however, he brings in a rock and roll urgency, and once again, his cockiness turns into pleading. It's a really successful performance. It's kind of reminiscent of some of the rock rewrites he did back on his Rolling Thunder review tour in the 1970s, and it especially makes the most of the iconic line, that big silver moon's gonna shine like a spoon. Again, it turns it from a playful country turn of phrase to a desperate attempt to persuade a lover. Track number 5 is the Mexican influenced and Mexican set, Just Like Tom Thumb's Blues. So this was never my favorite of the Highway 61 material. And I guess it's because it's in this intentionally ambivalent state. It's about sort of various frustrating, mediocre, uncomfortable situations, but nothing is unequivocally bad. He starts to say good things about Melinda before making her seem unpleasant, or the singer will say he's struggling with drugs and alcohol, but then just says, oh, I'll go back to New York City and I'll be fine. I found again the concert visuals from the film of this album really helped, as Dylan's facial expressions helped push through the loneliness this song is about. So you might not get the individual anecdotes that are in this song. I certainly don't. But by recounting one sort of uncomfortable situation after another of a kind of rambling person, Dylan is speaking to a kind of loneliness that a lot of people can feel. We then get another Highway 61 song in the Tombstone Blues. The original Highway 61 version of this is kind of similar to like a Rolling Stone. It's upbeat, it's having fun with the folk rock, even as the lyrics are kind of on the cynical side. Whereas here he plays the song in a somber, rigid kind of way that makes you engage with the actual meanings of the lyrics, distrust for the state of American politics in the Vietnam War era. Unfortunately, I don't particularly like this reinvention because while it is cool that he found a new sound for it, it just becomes too monotone for how many lyrics it has. And while he tries to find ways to say lyrics with distinct expressions, like the iconic line, the sun's not yellow, it's chicken, the music at the end of the day is too repetitive. This one, it captures its mood at the expense of being an enjoyable song. We then get to Be Alone with You from Nashville Skyline. It's delivered in a vaguely bluesy way. There's less to say about this song, just as I don't think I would have had much to say about it on Nashville Skyline. Next, we get the song What Was It You Wanted from Oh Mercy. And this is interesting because this collection is framed as the early songs of Bob Dylan. And I don't know, maybe now Bob Dylan feels like 1989 was relatively early, but I think more what's going on is he's thinking about albums that were beloved, but not necessarily individual songs that were beloved. So just like he'll play songs off of Blonde and Blonde and Highway 61 that aren't the biggest hits, he'll play a song from Oh Mercy that wasn't necessarily a hit, but that album as a whole was critically acclaimed. My main problem with Oh Mercy, kind of like Highway 61, is all the tracks, especially in the second half, just sounded too similar. And the thing is, lots of them were very well written tracks. So to put a song from Oh Mercy in between other songs that don't have that same melancholy feel, it actually makes it a much more enjoyable song. Track 9 is the highlight of this one. It's Forever Young. This is one of the few that I would actually say is one of Bob Dylan's greatest hits on here, but it's a bit of a weird one because it came a few years after he had had any success. And it also doesn't sound like a Bob Dylan song. You know, the lyrics are simple and earnest. This time he doesn't sing the chorus. I guess he decided it would be too much of a strain on his voice, but you barely notice because it has the same catchiness, and he uses this unusual musical instrument. It's called a dulceola to play a riff that kind of replaces the chorus, and it works very well. Track number 10 is a blues song from Blonde on Blonde called Pledging My Time. And again, it's another example of a song that Dylan would have delivered cool and cocky originally, trying to put a bit more emotional seriousness into the vocal delivery. And again, this is quite the interesting song. It's about someone expressing love for someone while continuously being distracted by various happenings. I think it's a good observation about what relationships are like, you know, the contradiction between wanting someone to be absolutely devoted to you when, of course, we all have distracted minds. And when I heard this on Blonde, I thought, oh, this is just Bob Dylan doing a 12-bar blues, and I kind of skipped over it. But slowing it down a bit, bringing out the expression in the lyrics, makes you appreciate it's actually an interesting composition. Track 11 is The Wicked Messenger from John Wesley Harding. I think this one is fairly close to the original, and like the original, I don't love it as a song in the sense that it doesn't feel catchy. That said, it's a good concept song. It sounds uniquely creepy. It just, again, doesn't please me the way I think a song should please me. Then we get a song called Watching the River Flow. This is another one I hadn't heard before. I think was only released on a Greatest Hits album. And again, it's a bluesy song, but it has a bit of a bridge to add some variety to the melody. And this is another one where the film visuals really help because one sees Dylan singing this song in earnestness while people are dancing to his music in a stylized way, but you have the sense they're not really engaging with his lyrics. And maybe this has been a theme throughout his career. He's someone who feels like he has a lot to say, but he's not someone who has a lot of confidence that he's certainly not that he's changing the world or even that the meaning of his songs will resonate. And at least in the context of this performance, he looks kind of concerned about that. Track number 13, the other one that I would consider one of the true greatest hits of Bob Dylan, It's All Over Now, Baby Blue from the Bringing It All Back Home album. This one could be the big sentimental closer. You know, back in the day, it was his goodbye to acoustic music. And who knows if this is like a retirement album, this could be the big goodbye. But Bob Dylan's not one to retire. Bob Dylan's on his never ending tour. Bob Dylan is someone who will always play the next musical project when it comes along to him, whether it's 6 months down the road or 5 years down the road. So I feel like there's almost an irony in that you expect this to be the goodbye one, but it's one of the ones he reinvents less. He sings it not poorly, but kind of stiffly compared to the best songs on here, as if, sure, he likes this one, but he's not going to make it the big dramatic farewell because that's not what he does. And then finally, we have the album ending with an instrumental played on the harmonica called Sierra's Theme. It sounds cool. It's a bit too repetitive to really count as a standalone song on its own, but it's nice to hear Bob just playing the harmonica for an extended period, given how associated he is with that instrument. So Shadow Kingdom is an interesting collection of songs. It makes you rethink some of these. You know, doesn't again rise to the rank of being one of my favorite Bob Dylan albums, but it's a success for what it is. And Alma Harrell certainly got to play her part on the concert documentary for, you know, footage that's just Bob Dylan playing music. She got just about as creative as she could. So let me know your thoughts on Shadow Kingdom, and I will see you with more music reviews going forward. I'm Zach Morgenstern. This is Ludwig von B. See you next time.